The wife of a celebrated chef and restaurant owner disappeared. He said she left him. What happened next stunned their community.
Deep within the Viens household, in Lomita, Southern California, lurked a slew of sinister secrets. A den of drug dealing, alcoholism, and domestic violence. But on one ominous October night in 2009, all hell broke loose, and Dawn Viens vanished without a trace. When the investigators finally uncovered the truth behind her disappearance, the revelation would send shivers down the spines of even the most seasoned homicide detectives. What was the reason behind Dawn's disappearance? How did the investigators solve the case? Hi, and welcome to Real Crime Storytime, where we cover solved, unsolved, and mysterious cases from across the globe. Today's case takes us to Lomita, which is Spanish for Little Hill, a city in the state of California. With a population of just over 20,000 people, it is one of the smaller cities in the state. Like most places in California, it has a warm and welcoming climate. It has many popular attractions, including the South Coast Botanic Garden and the Lomita Railroad Museum, making it well worth a visit. But it was here that a horrific crime took place in 2009. Dawn Marie Viens was born in March 1970. She and David Viens met in the 1990s while she was still married to his first wife. David, originally from Vermont, was 10 years Dawn's senior, but age was never a factor in their love story. They met in the early 1990s while working at a restaurant, and Dawn quickly fell for the divorced dad of 3. They married in 1997, and their love only grew stronger with time. David and Dawn Viens had been married for almost 12 years and decided to move to the charming suburb of Lomita in Southern California in 2008. Together, they opened a delightful restaurant called the Time Contemporary Cafe, which quickly became the talk of the town. Lomita, a small town in Los Angeles County, offered the perfect setting for the couple's new venture, with other small businesses located adjacent to their cozy cafe. The couple worked tirelessly to ensure their restaurant was a success, with Dawn serving as the overall manager and hostess, and David the talented chef, using only fresh, locally sourced ingredients in his scrumptious dishes. Despite the long hours, the couple never lost their spark and worked side by side with a small crew to create an eclectic menus of burgers, sandwiches, salads, pasta, and even tacos. With only 2 servers on staff, Dawn greeted the customers with her warm smile and infectious energy, making everyone feel right at home. David and Dawn Viens were quite the pair, always on the move and searching for their next adventure. David already had 3 children from his previous marriage. One of the children, Jacqueline or Jackie, was close to her stepmother, Dawn. Jackie was a toddler when David and Dawn started living together. Dawn and Jackie had a bond, and Dawn even taught Jackie a lot of things, including how to write cursive. During their marriage, David and Dawn moved around a lot. Initially, they landed in the beautiful Anna Marie Island, Florida, where they opened up their own little piece of heaven, the Beach City Market and Grill. It was a family affair with Dawn's brother, David Pepin, managing the restaurant. After this, when they moved to Southern California, it was like they had found their forever home. Dawn, with her gorgeous auburn hair and sun-kissed skin, looked like a true California girl at only 39 years old. Her perpetual smile and natural beauty made her a joy to be around. Her husband David was also quite the catch, with his boyishly handsome face and charming demeanor. Even at 48 years old, he still looked young and vibrant, often wearing a baseball cap to hide his thinning hair. Together, they worked tirelessly to make their restaurant a success, and their hard work paid off. Everyone around them could see the love and happiness radiating from this wonderful couple, who seemed to have had it all. For years, Dawn and David Viens had been the perfect couple in the eyes of their friends and family. Their marriage appeared to be a match made in heaven, with seemingly no trouble in paradise. However, looks can be deceiving, and beneath the surface, there was more to their relationship than met the eye. Beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect marriage, Dawn and David Viens were hiding a dark and dangerous secret. Their drug and alcohol abuse, along with mounting financial issues, had created deep cracks in their relationship, and it appeared that domestic violence was also a regular occurrence. Dawn's friend Karen Patterson had noticed suspicious bruises on her friend's body on multiple occasions, with marks on her neck being the most recent in 2009. When Karen pressed her for answers, Dawn finally confided that her husband had grabbed her by the neck and choked her. Karen was understandably concerned, but Dawn dismissed it as just an argument that had gone too far. However, a month later, Karen received another distressing call from Dawn. This time, she was so scared that she locked herself in the bathroom during a heated argument with David. Karen immediately offered to call the police, but Dawn begged her not to report the incident. Meanwhile, Joe Kakashi, the owner of the motorcycle repair shop across from the Time Contemporary Cafe, had also become privy to the couple's troubles. David confided in him about Dawn's drinking problem, while Dawn revealed that David was too controlling. As the secrets continued to pile up, it was becoming increasingly clear that something truly sinister was brewing behind closed doors. As the fall of 2009 approached, Dawn Viens seemed to be hiding something. In the month of October, she asked Joe to hold on to $700 in cash, seemingly to keep it a secret from her husband. But where did the money come from? Was Dawn stealing from the restaurant's tabs? As tensions grew between the couple, David discovered the secret stash on October 18th and erupted in fury, and in a verbal spat, David threatened to kill Dawn. Meanwhile, Dawn had arranged to drop off more money with Joe on October 19th, but she never showed up. She went missing on October 18th after her argument with David. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Fear and uncertainty gripped the small community of Lomita as everyone wondered what could have happened to Dawn Viens. Was she a victim of domestic violence, and had David followed through on his chilling threat? The truth would eventually come to light, but the mystery surrounding Dawn's disappearance lingered like a dark cloud over the town. As the days passed without any word from Dawn Viens, Joe Kakachi's concern grew. He knew David Viens' story didn't add up, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible had happened to her. Despite David's claim that Dawn had simply left him, Joe couldn't help but notice that her car was still parked outside the restaurant. And when he asked David about it, the man had an answer ready. He told Joe that Dawn had left him, but it sounded like a lie. Joe decided to keep a closer eye on David, watching him from across the parking lot at his motorcycle repair shop. Meanwhile, David continued to spin this tale to the restaurant employees while trying to find someone to help him run the business in Dawn's absence. But Joe knew there was more to this story, and he was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. David Viens' call to his daughter Jackie came as a surprise, but it wasn't long before she found herself on a plane headed to California. As she landed, Jackie couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement at the thought of spending time with her dad. But as she arrived at the Time Cafe, she couldn't ignore the tension in the air. David told her about the problems he and Dawn had been having, and Jackie knew that her beloved stepmother had been a part of her life for 17 years. She couldn't help but wonder what had gone wrong between the couple. And then as memories flooded back to her, Jackie realized that Dawn's excessive drinking may have been a factor. She remembered a time in Florida when Dawn had chugged down a beer in a restaurant early in the morning, and how she had hidden her drinking from her husband. As Jackie tried to make sense of it all, she began to realize that there was more to this situation than her father had let on. The suspense was palpable as she tried to piece together the puzzle of what had happened to Dawn and why her father had asked her to come and help out. With each passing moment, the tension at Time Cafe continued to build, and Jackie knew that something was amiss. Joe Kakachi was on high alert at the time as well, and his suspicion was triggered by David Viens' actions. Just 2 weeks after Dawn's departure, David was spotted holding hands with a young waitress named Kathy Gavin. David quickly promoted her to Dawn's former position, but that wasn't all. Joe witnessed a bone-chilling scene when he saw David's truck in the parking lot before the cafe opened, and Jackie Viens and Kathy Gavin were seen dumping boxes of clothes belonging to Dawn in the dumpsters. At the same time, Karen Patterson, Dawn's friend, was especially concerned after hearing about David's history of violence towards her. Despite Karen's efforts to involve the police, they didn't seem to be taking it seriously. Dana Pepin, Dawn's sister, took matters into her own hands and filed a missing persons report. She knew David's story didn't make sense. If Dawn had really left, why hadn't she told her family? David Pepin, Dawn's younger brother, knew the couple well. He said his sister's marriage to David was toxic. As Dawn matured and wanted more independence, David refused to relinquish control, and Dawn became more and more unhappy. Just when Dawn's case seemed to be going nowhere, a new lead emerged. On December 4th, 3 months after Dawn was last seen, Larry Altman, a reporter for the Daily Breeze, filed a story about the missing woman. For his article, Altman spoke with David Viens, who told him that his wife had stormed out after a fight, carrying only her purse. Larry Altman began digging into David Viens' past and uncovered some disturbing information. Not only did Viens have a history of drug-related charges dating back to the early 1990s, but they weren't just minor possession charges. He had been arrested for cocaine and marijuana distribution. Altman also noticed Viens using the past tense when talking about his wife, Dawn. It was enough to make him wonder if Viens knew more than what he was letting on. Could David Viens be hiding a dark secret behind his wife's disappearance? New details had emerged about David Viens' past, shedding light on his character and raising questions about his possible involvement in his wife's disappearance. While researching for his article, Larry Altman uncovered that in 1993, Viens was convicted for distribution of cocaine in Vermont. Despite facing several years in prison, he was given a deal to turn informant for federal agents. But Viens' trouble with the law didn't end there. A decade later, he was convicted on federal drug-related charges and fled to Mexico to avoid serving his sentence. Viens eventually turned himself in 2 years later, but in 2005, he was again convicted on federal marijuana distribution charges in Florida. These revelations have led many to wonder, could Viens' criminal past hold the key to Dawn's disappearance? As the investigation into the disappearance of Dawn began to heat up, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department turned their attention towards David Viens. Sergeant Rich Garcia was appointed to lead the investigation, and it was officially classified as a homicide case in February 2011. In an effort to gather more evidence, a wiretap was placed on David's phone, and his daughter Jackie was summoned for an interview upon her return from North Carolina. Meanwhile, journalist Larry Altman was contacted by Garcia, who provided him with exclusive information about the discovery of blood in David's home. The investigator hoped that the story would put pressure on David, potentially causing him to slip up and reveal incriminating information. However, Garcia neglected to mention that the blood was too old and degraded to be useful in the investigation. But did this tactic prove successful in bringing Dawn's killer to justice? On February 22, 2011, David received an alarming phone call from his daughter Jackie. Jackie was panicking and told David she had told the truth to the police officers. David was suddenly drenched in cold sweats. But what truth did Jackie tell the officers? Let's delve into a quick flashback. It was after there was no clue about Dawn's disappearance in October 2009 that Jackie approached David, her father, to ask about Dawn's whereabouts. It was a night in November 2009, and Jackie was sufficiently high on marijuana, and David was drunk. David said he hadn't heard from Dawn and didn't know where she was. Jackie pressed him for information, but he seemed bothered by her questions. As he drank more and more, he finally broke down and confessed that Dawn was dead. His story was that she had come home one night high on cocaine, and in a fit of rage, he had to tape her up to control her. He woke up the next morning to find her dead, and he had disposed of her body in a way it would never be found. Jackie was left feeling uneasy. It all seemed too convenient. Why had her father waited so long to say something? It was all very suspicious. Jackie was caught between a rock and a hard place. On one hand, she wanted to do the right thing and tell the authorities about her father's confession. On the other, she couldn't bear to be the one to put her own father in prison. But things took a turn for the worse when David asked her to send messages from Dawn's phone, pretending to be her. Jackie knew it was a terrible idea, but she couldn't say no to her father's desperate pleas. As she typed out the messages, her heart ached with the weight of the lies she was helping to perpetuate. She sent 2 messages to Dawn's friends, saying that she was okay and was back in Florida, starting her life over. She signed it with the nickname Pixie, but Dawn's friends immediately knew that the messages had not been written by her. Pixie had been misspelled. Instead of reading P-I-X-I-E, it read P-I-X-Y. They shared this information with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. On February 22, 2011, Jackie Viens spilled everything to the homicide investigators. She told them about her father's confession regarding Dawn's accidental death and how he refused to reveal where the body was. No body, no case. The same day, Jackie made a desperate call to her father. She'd been questioned by the detectives and had no choice but to spill the beans about the confession. On February 23, 2011, Larry Altman's follow-up story made the front page. David Viens realized that he was under investigation and the police were onto him. Panic set in. David knew he was running out of time. Had his drunken mistake cost him everything? David Viens was in full-blown panic. He clutched a newspaper with a headline that declared, Dawn's disappearance as a homicide investigation. He ran to his girlfriend Kathy Galvin's apartment in Torrance, spilling out a sobbing confession that Dawn wasn't coming back and that it was an accident. Ignoring Galvin's attempts to calm him down, David jumped into his car and sped towards the coast. Galvin managed to jump into the passenger seat, trying to keep him from doing something drastic. Tears streaming down his face, David refused to listen. David's car, a Toyota 4Runner, was going over 80 miles per hour when a sheriff's deputy noticed it. The deputy tried to stop the car by blowing his car's siren, but David's vehicle did not stop. Then the deputy started chasing them. As David's car reached the point, Vicente Lighthouse and Rancho Palos Verdes, David pulled into the parking lot. It was a spot that overlooked the cliffs that plunged into the Pacific Ocean from 80 to 130 feet high. Galvin pleaded with him to stop, tugging at his clothes to keep him from doing something irreversible. In the meantime, the deputy had also reached the same location and tried to speak to David. But David was inconsolable, murmuring apologies and stating that no one would believe him. With a final apology, he climbed over the guardrail as Galvin watched in horror, with Galvin frantically trying to hold him back. David stood on the other side of the guardrail, ignoring the deputy's attempts to talk him down. But before he could jump, he said something to Galvin, kissed her, and then pushed her away with both hands. The deputy moved quickly, grabbing Galvin and pulling her away from the edge. But it was too late for David, who took a few steps and leaped off the cliff's edge, plunging 80 feet into the churning ocean below. It was a heart-stopping moment as the deputy and Galvin watched in horror, wondering if David had met his end at the bottom of the cliff. A man who was once on the run now lay motionless at the bottom of the ocean. His fate seemed to be forever sealed. But David Viens ended up surviving his suicide attempt and was rushed to the hospital for surgery. The news of his survival came as a surprise for many, including the family of his deceased wife. They had long suspected David's involvement in her disappearance, and his suicide attempt only reinforced their beliefs. On March 1, 2011, David spoke with Sergeant Garcia from his hospital bed and made a shocking confession regarding his role in Dawn's death. It was a moment of relief for Dawn's family, who had been searching for answers for so long. David Viens coldly admitted to Sergeant Garcia that he had become violent for no reason, leading to his wife's death. He claimed that it was related to money missing from the restaurant and his wife's drug use. According to David, he had taped her hands and feet multiple times before when she got out of control, but this time he placed tape over her mouth, and she had died of suffocation. When asked where her body was, David simply led investigators to believe that it could be found on the restaurant property. However, despite months of searching and tearing up floors, nothing was found. On March 1, 2011, David Viens was charged with the murder of his wife, Dawn, despite her body still missing. 3 weeks later, David requested to speak with investigators again and offered to reveal how he disposed of Dawn's body. His second interview with the police was recorded, and though he was recovering from his injuries in the hospital, he appeared coherent. During the interview, David told Sergeant Garcia a disturbing story that was unlike any he had heard before, providing chilling details. David's voice quivered as he revealed the gruesome details to Sergeant Garcia. He had to make it appear as if his wife had left him, and so he came up with a plan so insane it could only be imagined in nightmares. He transported Dawn's body to the restaurant and placed her in a 55-gallon pot with water. David cooked her body for 4 days, straining what he could out of the pot at the end of each day. But what about the remains he couldn't strain? Those were hidden in the kitchen's grease pit, and the larger portions, double-bagged and thrown into the cafe's dumpster. David's madness knew no bounds, as he revealed that he had stashed Dawn's skull in his mother's attic in Torrance. It was a horror show straight out of a thriller, and Sergeant Garcia could only listen in disbelief. David Viens' story was horrific and chilling, but some found it too difficult to believe. Despite this, Sergeant Garcia was convinced that David's confession was true. He reasoned that in a time of panic, people tend to revert to what they know, and as a cook, David's actions were not far-fetched. However, when David's trial began in September 2012, he recanted his confession, claiming that his admission of cooking his wife's body was simply a hallucination from the powerful painkillers he had been given after his severe injuries. But the details of his confession, like hiding his wife's skull in his mother's attic, could not be ignored. Although the house was searched and no evidence was found, the prosecution still believed that David was a cold-blooded killer, motivated by rage and anger. They argued that David should be convicted of first-degree murder, while his defense maintained that his wife's death was an accident, and David only panicked and disposed of her body. It was a gruesome trial that would ultimately decide the fate of a man who had committed a horrific crime. The trial began with the defense arguing that it was impossible for David to have cooked his wife's body for days at a restaurant without anyone noticing. However, the prosecution claimed that he boiled the body all night and hid it during the day. The defense further argued that David had not intended for his wife to die when he taped up her limbs and mouth. Despite the defense's arguments, the jury found David guilty of second-degree murder. They were swayed by his suicide attempt, which they interpreted as an admission of guilt. At his sentencing, David ranted and insisted that he had not harmed his wife. He apologized to Dawn's siblings and pleaded for a new trial so that he could testify in his own defense. David Viens, a man accused of killing his wife, was denied a motion for a new trial and was sentenced to 15 years in prison for not speaking up in his own defense during his first trial.
There's no happy ending. I don't think there's any winners or losers. Two families have suffered tremendously, and we will continue to. He has to pay for what he did. He tried to get away with it.
However, 4 years after his imprisonment, he gave an interview to Dateline and provided his account of what happened on the night his wife was killed. According to David, he returned home after a long work week and found his wife Dawn was not home. He suspected she was out looking for cocaine, and to avoid being disturbed, he decided to barricade the bedroom door. When Dawn arrived home around 3 a.m., she began pounding on the door, demanding to be let in. She eventually broke through and jumped onto the sleeping David, starting to slap his face. David claimed that he kept repeating that he wanted to be left alone to sleep, but Dawn continued to attack him. After that, she left the bedroom and went downstairs to the living room. David followed her and found a package of cocaine on the table, which upset him because she had brought the drugs home after she told him she wouldn't. Dawn became enraged when he poured the cocaine down the sink and attacked him again. To defend himself, David taped her arms and legs and wrapped the tape around her mouth so she could not scream. David left Dawn taped up in the living room and went to bed. The next morning he woke up and realized that Dawn was dead. He found her cold, stiff body in the living room where she had vomited and suffocated because of the tape on her mouth. David claims he did not intend to kill her and only wanted to calm the situation down to deal with it in the morning. He panicked that no one would believe it was an accident, and he would be accused of murdering Dawn. So he decided to make it look like she had run off and left him. This time he said he placed her body inside 3 garbage bags and disposed of it in the dumpsters behind the cafe. David's account of events raises many questions, such as why he did not call for medical assistance after Dawn suffocated, and how he disposed of her body. The interview provided some insight into what happened that night, but it also raised suspicions about David's actions. David Viens claimed that the story about boiling his wife was a hallucination brought on by injuries and painkillers. However, his story raises questions. Why would Dawn attack him upon coming home? Why did she go to the living room for drugs instead of doing them upon her arrival? And why would he follow her downstairs if he just wanted to sleep? Additionally, the idea of calming down a situation by taping someone's limbs and mouth together seemed far-fetched. Moreover, David had expressed anger about Dawn allegedly stealing money from the restaurant. Although he tried to downplay it as just a small amount, it's possible that Dawn was trying to save up money to leave her husband. Without anyone left to tell the story, the circumstances surrounding Dawn's death remain unknown. One possible explanation for David's actions is that he defaulted to his experience as a cook in times of stress, which is why he may have initially considered boiling Dawn's body. His daughter Jackie even testified that she heard him joke about disposing of a body in this manner in the past. Overall, it seems plausible that David may have acted violently towards Dawn due to her desire to leave him and his anger towards her alleged theft. As the sun sets on the sleepy California town of Lomita, the once bustling Time Contemporary Cafe now stands deserted and abandoned. There is news that someone else bought the place. It was here that David Viens, the friendly chef who charmed diners with his pasta primavera, worked his culinary magic until one day, everything changed. Now, the cafe's Yelp page remains as a haunting reminder of the past, but the once bustling cafe had been replaced by a pizzeria, the scent of tomato sauce and mozzarella cheese wafting through the air, And as David Viens serves out his sentence, he waits for the day when he will be eligible for parole in 2023. But the question still lingers. Did he really cook a body to dispose of it? Or was it all just a hallucination? The mystery of Dawn Viens' disappearance and the truth of what happened at the Time Contemporary Cafe may never be fully known.
The purple ribbon that you see here is a symbol of something very significant in our society today. However, the story behind the popularity of these purple ribbons is heartbreaking. This is the story of Lisa Bianco, whose death on March 4, 1989, brought about a lot of changes in the US laws which are related to the security of women and domestic affairs. How do you think Lisa died? How is the purple ribbon associated with the death of Lisa Bianco? Today's case takes us to Mishawaka, St. Joseph County in the state of Indiana. Mishawaka, the second largest community in St. Joseph County with more than 48,000 inhabitants, lies 7 miles along the lovely St. Joseph River. North of Mishawaka, between Grape Road and Main Street, lies a very outstanding shopping area. Shopaholics adore the variety of stores in and surrounding University Park Mall. Along with retail behemoths like Apple, Macy's, and JCPenney, there are smaller chains and regional boutiques. You can find just about every restaurant you would want to eat at in addition to the shopping. Whole Foods Market entered the retail industry in 2013. The second busiest retail shopping center in Indiana is located in this area. Top employers in Mishawaka, a wonderful area to live, work, and play, include AM General, Bayer, Damon Products, Siemens, and St. Joseph Regional Medical Center. But it was here, in this seemingly idealistic town, that a tragedy occurred in 1989. Lisa Bianco was born on April 22, 1959, to her parents Eugene Bianco and Millie Bianco. In 1977, Lisa met Alan Metheny and got married within a few months of knowing him that very year itself. They were residents of St. Joseph County in Mishawaka, Indiana. The couple had 2 daughters, Brooke and Amber. According to his mother-in-law, Millie Bianco, Alan Metheny seemed like the ideal son-in-law for any woman. He had a pleasing appearance, was handsome, and very charming as a person. He was not, however, the ideal spouse in reality. Lisa and Alan were married for 7 years before Millie realized her daughter was living a nightmare. From the very beginning of their wedding, Lisa was enduring constant domestic violence. In fact, Alan was not secretive about hitting his wife and would often abuse her even in public. However, Lisa did not inform her mother about the torture she was going through. She endured it for 7 long years of her marriage before she filed for divorce in 1985. The custody of the daughters was a significant area of conflict for the two, due to which Alan kidnapped their 2 daughters and left the state shortly after the divorce was finalized. In exchange for him bringing the girls back home safely, Lisa agreed to drop the charges against Alan for kidnapping their daughters. After the divorce, Lisa started to rebuild her life. She went to Indiana University. She started working as a counselor for victims of domestic violence in Elkhart Shelter. 2 years went by before Alan Metheny came back to Indiana again, and the first thing he did was attack Lisa. According to Lisa's report, the attack and series of events that took place happened too quickly for Lisa to react and respond.
I'm afraid that if he does get a hold of me again, I'm not going to be able to talk him out of it.
He came to her house in Mishawaka, disconnected the phone wires, strangled her with nip ties, and tore off her blouse. He kept on hitting her on the head and said he was doing everything out of love in response to Lisa's screams that she did not wish to die. He forced himself onto her, and Lisa stopped fighting back at that point, as she knew she did not have the physical strength to stop Alan from assaulting her. The attack was severe and made Lisa realize that if she did not press charges against Alan, This would lead to something way more severe and dangerous. Her prime motive was to keep her children away from such violence. Thus, she reported the crime, and Alan was charged with assaulting her in 1987. He was given an 8-year prison term, with 3 years suspended after entering a plea agreement to a single felony violence charge in Pendleton Reformatory. While in prison, Alan expressed his desire to kill Lisa multiple times. He would call Lisa and threaten to kill her. In 1988, Alan's mother called Lisa to inform her that Alan was eligible for a 1-day pass where he would be released for a single day. When Lisa got the news, she immediately called her prosecutor, who assured her that the pass would be cancelled as it was a direct threat to the safety of Lisa and her kids, considering the death threats that were made by Alan while he was in the prison. He asked Lisa to send out a letter to the Pendleton Reformatory to cancel the day, and also told her to request in the letter that if any further dates were awarded to Alan, Lisa should be directly notified about the release so that she could maintain a safe distance from the perpetrator. On March 4, 1989, Alan was eligible for another 8 hours of furlough. For those who don't know, an official temporary release from confinement is known as a prison furlough. Prisoners on furlough may be permitted to leave alone, although if accompanied by guards, they frequently have to cover the cost. Furloughs are occasionally given for medical reasons, to enable offenders to attend funerals, or to contact employers in order to secure work after release. Some research suggests that furloughs lessen violent outbursts, but there have also been well-publicized instances of furloughed inmates committing crimes while on furlough, returning late, or eluding capture. In the Federal Bureau of Prisons, furloughs are strictly intended to advance correctional objectives and are not seen as a way to reward good behavior or reduce a criminal sentence. He received an 8-hour furlough from Pendleton, where he had been imprisoned after spending nearly 2 years behind bars. The permit allowed him to travel to Indianapolis, but Alan Matheny chose to go directly to St. Joseph County. Alan was supposed to meet his friends after his mother picked him up from the prison. After changing his clothes at his friend's place, he traveled to Mishawaka while grabbing a shotgun from his friend's home. From the desperation in his behavior, it was quite clear that he knew what he was doing. 2 doors away from his ex-wife's home, he parked the car in a lot before breaking in through the back door of Lisa's home. When Lisa saw that it was Alan who had entered their house and was after her, she tried to run, but Alan chased Lisa as she fled out of the house into the neighborhood while their 10-year-old daughter tried seeking help from the neighbors. He chased her down and hit her with a shotgun, so hard that the butt of the shotgun shattered. He then climbed into his car and drove off. His blunt force trauma resulted in Lisa's death. Even after taking all the right steps, like abiding by the rules of the system and creating a safe environment for others in the community, Lisa Bianco could not save herself from the violence of an abuser. According to the autopsy, Lisa Bianco suffered a blunt instrument head trauma that caused her to pass away. It's important to note that at the trial, the prosecution presented convincing proof that Alan killed Lisa Bianco. At the trial, Alan's brother and a friend of his both testify that Alan arrived at the friend's house on March 4, 1989, around 1 p.m. The friend also testified that his own stepson's pistol was gone when Alan left his house an hour later. The daughter of Matheny, Brooke, testified that she witnessed her father enter the house and confront her mother on that fateful afternoon when she was at home in St. Joseph County with her mother. Brooke raced next door and requested a neighbor to phone the police at her mother's urging. Several neighbors testified that they saw Matheny repeatedly strike Lisa with a shotgun as she was being violently attacked and killed in the middle of the street. Because of the overwhelming evidence, the defense attorney conceded as he made his opening remarks On March 4, 1989, in the early afternoon, Alan Metheny beat his ex-wife to death in broad daylight on a public street corner in Mishawaka, Indiana. Defense attorneys continue to assert that Metheny was insane at the time of the murder as a legal defense, but two different court-appointed physicians each testified to the court that Metheny was not insane at the time he committed the murders. Psychologists have determined that Metheny had schizophreniform disease. Because of his mental illness, he thought Lisa Bianco was involved in a conspiracy against him. Purposeful homicide and burglary while on a furlough were the direct charges against Alan. The weight of the aggravating factor was significantly lessened in Alan's case. Indiana Supreme Court Justice DeBrula wrote in a dissenting opinion, because the intent of burglary was the intent to kill. At trial, Scott King, who was Alan's lawyer, attempted to prove his client Alan Metheny was insane. Although he tried to assert the argument of his client's mental illness in the court, Alan ended up losing the trial and was given the death sentence. He was executed by lethal injection on September 28, 2005, for the murder of his ex-wife, Lisa Marie Bianco. "I love my children and family." In his last statement, Alan apologized for the suffering he had brought on for them. "I'm sure that under the loving care of their wonderful parents, my grandchildren will grow up healthy and happy." National media coverage of Bianco's murder led then-Governor Evan Bayh, who was just halfway through his first term, to abolish furloughs and reject almost all clemency pleas over his 8 years in office. The furlough laws that existed before the Lisa Bianco case simply did not have any provisions that secured the safety of the victims. In fact, these policies and laws rather sheltered the freedom of the offenders. There was no one in the system who took the responsibility of the safety of a woman. Even though Lisa sent a letter to the prison where Alan was serving his sentence about directly notifying Lisa about any furlough or release of Alan, they did not inform Lisa, and that carelessness led to the unfortunate death of a woman. The case raised fresh concerns about prisoner release programs in general and the right of abuse victims to be informed when their abusers are released. Since Alan was locked up in 1987, Lisa had written and called correction department officials, pleading with them to alert her before Alan was ever released. Just 1 week before Alan received his pass, department officials found her request in his file. According to a department official, despite the clear request from Lisa, nobody informed her. According to Kerry Lobel, head of the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, this sent a chilling message to battered women that the criminal justice system is not fully prepared to protect them, and that authorities did not take their abusers' threats seriously. According to Millie Bianco, Lisa Bianco's mother, justice isn't precisely what people would anticipate it to be. "I think we're getting closer. This is more conclusive, but I believe that the death penalty got ineffective long ago, simply because it takes so long." Despite believing Alan should be executed, Millie Bianco said she had conflicting feelings about Governor Mitch Daniels' choice to reject mercy on Tuesday. "This is a man who washed dishes in my kitchen, could be charming, and loved his dog." She commented that what happened was a tremendously outraged murder. Lisa got chased out of her house in her pants and hit to death on the neighbor's doorstep. Compared to that, what he will receive will be a piece of cake. According to Millie, the legal system was almost to the point of irresponsibility and a complete lack of respect for the victim's rights. She was aware that he was going to find her out as soon as he got out and attack her again. Legal experts claim that one of the issues was that jails lacked the resources to find inmates who might have been in danger. For abused women, whose attackers were more likely to return than other criminals, this error could have been catastrophic. Lisa Bianco's case was an example of such a disaster. Her untimely and brutal death was something that could have been avoided. Indiana and the country saw significant transformation as a result of Lisa's death. There are currently regulations requiring victims to be informed when an offender is released, and the furlough policy has been reviewed. In order to remember Lisa, there is also the purple ribbon, which serves as a reminder of domestic abuse awareness. Lisa's favorite color was purple, thus her loved ones and friends decorated St. Joseph County in purple ribbons to mourn her unfortunate and violent demise. Today, in 2023, with the help of different laws and policies, women are comparatively in a better space now. However, there are still cases across the globe which see a similar ending like Lisa Bianco's story. As long as such a story exists, the purple ribbon will always remind us of the pain that domestic violence inflicted on lives, but also the courage to fight back and never stop. It all started on a blustery afternoon in July 1970, when tourists at Lockhart Gorge near Port Campbell National Park in Australia witnessed a bizarre sight that left them utterly speechless. A battered white 1956 Holden was found teetering at the edge of a cliff. Upon closer inspection, the tourists were horrified to find the bodies of a mother and her 3 young children inside the vehicle. The car was badly damaged, as if it had been involved in a head-on collision, and the windshield was shattered into a million pieces. It was a scene straight out of a nightmare, and the mystery surrounding it only deepened when it was revealed that the husband and father of the victims, Elmer Kyle Crawford, had vanished without a trace. The Crawford family murders were a brutal and senseless crime that left investigators and the public stunned. How could such a happy and loving family end up dead in a car at the bottom of a cliff? Who could have a motive to harm them? The Crawford family was a happy and loving family living in Glenroy, Victoria, Australia. Therese Crawford, the mother of the family, was a kind and nurturing woman who had a passion for helping others. She was born in 1934 in the small town of Tallangatta, Victoria. She met her husband, Elmer Kyle Crawford, while working as a nurse at the Austin Hospital in Melbourne. They fell in love and were married in 1955. Elmer Kyle Crawford was born in May 1930 and grew up in rural Victoria. He was a hard-working man and a skilled mechanic who worked for many years as a truck driver. By 1970, the couple had 3 children together: Catherine, aged 13, James, aged 8, and Karen, aged 6. Catherine was a bright and ambitious girl who dreamed of becoming a nurse like her mother. She was a talented student and relished playing the piano. James, the middle child, was a friendly and outgoing boy who loved playing with his friends and exploring the outdoors. Karen, the youngest child, was a sweet and playful girl who was fond of animals and enjoyed spending time with her family. The Crawford family was a close-knit and happy family. They enjoyed going on family vacations and spending time at their holiday home in Port Campbell. However, their lives were tragically cut short on July 2, 1970, when their car was found at the bottom of a cliff at Lockhart Gorge, with the bodies of Therese and her 3 children inside. The crumpled and battered white Holden sedan teetered on the edge of the cliff, as if it had been flung there by some violent force. The windscreen, shattered and jagged, only added to the ominous atmosphere. As the rescuers peered inside the vehicle, a sense of unease washed over them. The missing back seat, replaced by a dark tarpaulin and blankets, hinted at something sinister. The blood, spattered on the dashboard and front seat, told a story of violence and horror. but it was the stench of death emanating from the car that sent chills down their spines. As they sifted through the jumbled mess in the car, they found a loaded .22 caliber rifle and family photos mixed with other debris. The presence of a 15mm electrical cord with alligator clips was bizarre and inexplicable. The cliff rescuer tried to piece together what had happened, but the scene defied all logic and reason. Elmer Crawford, the husband of Therese Crawford and father of the children, was missing from the scene. The police were curious about where he might be when the electrocution device came into their notice, and the realization that Elmer was an electrician struck them. Police quickly realized that he wasn't another victim, but the prime suspect in the case. The shocking discovery of the Crawford family's car at the edge of the cliff at Lockhart Gorge was just the beginning of a mystery that has puzzled investigators and the public for over 5 decades. Despite numerous investigations and theories, the truth behind the brutal murders of Therese, Catherine, James, and Karen Crawford remains elusive, shrouded in darkness and uncertainty. As the autopsies were carried out on the victims, the severity of their injuries became clear. There were burn marks on Therese's ears, and at first it was unclear what could have caused them. However, it was later discovered that a special electrocution device had been constructed using a 15-meter length of electrical lead and alligator clips. The clips were attached to Therese's ears while she slept before electrocuting her with a shock of 240 volts, inflicting unimaginable pain and horror on her. Catherine and James, the 2 older children, had also suffered brutal injuries. They had both sustained fractured skulls from a savage beating with a sharp weapon before being electrocuted. The youngest child, Karen, had been bashed to death with a hammer, which was also found in the car. It was a heart-wrenching discovery that sent shivers down the spine of even the most hardened investigators. At 5:50 p.m. on 2nd of July 1970, Crawford was seen in the driveway of his home. Later, at 6:10 p.m., police traced the car's registration to the Glenroy address, and a Broadmeadows officer, John McCarty, was dispatched to Crawford's home. At 6:20 p.m., McCarty knocked on the door, but there was no answer. It's possible that Crawford was inside, quietly trying to clean the bloodstains from the floor. They returned around 10 p.m., and fearing for the family's safety, they forced entry into the house. What they discovered inside would haunt them for years to come. The inside of the Crawford family home was an eerie scene, with bloodstains smeared all over the walls and floors, and a trail of blood leading from the bedrooms into the kitchen. The sight of blood-soaked bedding was particularly gruesome, indicating that the crime had taken place in the bedrooms. The smell of death hung heavily in the air, making it difficult for investigators to stay in the house for long periods. Amidst the carnage, detectives discovered a still foaming bottle of carpet-cleaning detergent, evidence that someone had tried to clean up the bloodstains. The scene was one of complete horror, and the violent nature of the crime left investigators puzzled as to who could have committed such a heinous act. As the investigation progressed, detectives stumbled upon a letter that was written by Therese. The letter contained intimate details of Therese's inner turmoil and deep distress about her 4th pregnancy, which conflicted with her strict Catholic beliefs. According to the letter, Therese had decided to keep the baby, despite her husband's wishes for her to have an abortion. The letter read, "I've been so upset, but what's the use of it? I'm 2.5 months now, so it looks like I've had it this time. We were going to come for Christmas, but won't be able to now, as I'll be due at the end of January." The letter was found by the investigators, along with a newspaper article about abortion written by the prominent Right to Life campaigner Margaret Tige. This discovery raised several questions in the minds of the investigators. Did Elmer bring this newspaper article to Therese and force her to carry out an abortion despite her strict Catholic beliefs? Was this what enraged Elmer and caused him to brutally murder his family? The homicide squad was called in, and arrangements were made to search the car at first light the next day. Cliff rescue volunteers George Cumming and Cecil Bergen were lowered down to the car, secured it to prevent it from slipping into the sea, and began their search. We lifted the tarpaulin, and Cec Bergen said, "I can see some feet." And, as the tarpaulin was lifted further, "I saw 3 sets of feet," Mr. Cummings said. When the tarpaulin was moved, a bedspread was folded back, and I saw 4 bodies wrapped in bedsheets. Homicide Squad Detective Adrian Donahue, who went on to become head of the Major Crime Squad, was at the top of the cliff that day. "I made an examination of each of the bodies as they were brought up," he said. He was the first to realize the savagery of the crime that would go on to haunt several generations of Victorian police. It was later discovered that 2 weeks before the murder, the couple had prepared new wills, leaving Crawford a sizable estate, including $3,000 in cash, the Glenroy house, and blocks of land in Queensland if anything happened to Therese. Crawford had also been stealing from his employer and selling the goods, a fact that was uncovered by police during their investigation. On the night of the murder, Crawford removed the back seat of the Holden to create more space inside. After his wife and children went to bed, he brutally murdered them in their sleep, still dressed in their pajamas. He then wrapped their bodies in blankets and loaded them into the car, along with a motor scooter, fuel cans, a rifle, and a hose. In the winter darkness, Crawford drove for 200 kilometers to Lockhart Gorge, where he moved Therese's body into the driver's seat and connected the hose to the exhaust, feeding it through the window. He pushed the car off the cliff, hoping to make it look like a murder-suicide committed by Therese. But the car became stuck on the ledge instead of plunging into the icy Southern Ocean. Police have no idea how Crawford returned to Glenroy, but they suspect he may have hitchhiked or used the motor scooter he carried in the boot with the bodies. Sightseers first noticed the car perched precariously on the ledge at the blowhole at 1:30 p.m. on July 2nd. Later that day, Crawford was seen in the driveway of his home at 5:30 p.m. A police officer was sent to the Crawford home at 6:20 p.m. after a registration number check revealed the car was owned by Crawford. Crawford returned home on the scooter and began cleaning up the crime scene when police came knocking in the early evening. However, when he realized that the police were onto him, he changed his plans. He vanished into thin air and was gone when officers forced entry into the home several hours later. The scooter was left behind. There are several theories about why Crawford murdered his family. One theory is that he was angry with Therese's refusal to terminate the pregnancy. Another theory is that Therese discovered her husband was stealing from his workplace and she threatened to report him or demanded a divorce. If the couple split, Crawford would have had a lot to lose. The tragedy of the Crawford family is heart-wrenching, and it's hard to imagine the depths of despair and anguish that the family must have experienced in the moments leading up to their brutal murder. Crawford's callous and premeditated actions not only took the lives of his wife and children, but also destroyed the lives of their extended family and friends. The police investigation revealed the dark secrets and disturbing behavior of a man who was a loving father and husband, but who also had a dark and dangerous side. The mystery of Crawford's disappearance only adds to the tragic and haunting nature of this case. Elmer Crawford, a man of few words, had a reputation for being a hard worker and a reliable electrician at the Victoria Racing Club in Flemington Racecourse. Although he was viewed as a skilled and knowledgeable employee, he kept to himself and didn't socialize much with others. He was known to be serious and reserved in his interactions with his colleagues, often maintaining a stoic demeanor that left them guessing about his personal life. Despite his quiet demeanor, Crawford was respected by his colleagues for his expertise and dedication to his job. He was meticulous in his work and took his responsibilities seriously, earning him a reputation as a competent and reliable electrician. However, his colleagues were unaware of the dark secrets that lurked behind his reserved exterior, including his history of domestic violence. Reports indicated that Crawford's wife, Therese Crawford, had left him multiple times due to his violent behavior, but she always returned to him. The discovery of the bodies of Therese and their 3 children made Crawford the prime suspect in the investigation. However, he was nowhere to be found, and the police searched for him relentlessly. For years after the brutal murders of his family and his subsequent disappearance, Elmer Crawford was the subject of several possible sightings. However, none of them could be confirmed. The police continued to follow leads and investigate potential sightings, but they were never able to locate Crawford. In 1994, a woman claimed to have personally known Elmer and bumped into him in Bondi, Australia. She confronted him by addressing him with his name, but he denied knowing her and claimed to have been traveling from New Zealand. Another potential lead arose in 2005, when a body in a morgue in Texas was believed to be Crawford's. Facial recognition technology identified the man as a possible match for Crawford, and it was discovered that the man had removed his fingerprints to conceal his identity. The hope was that Crawford had been living in the U.S. under an assumed identity. However, 5 years later, a blood relative of Crawford was discovered in New South Wales, and her DNA evidence proved that the man in the Texas morgue was not Crawford. Despite this setback, detectives from Victoria visited a remote and sparsely populated part of northwestern Australia in 2022 after a tip-off regarding a possible sighting. Unfortunately, the lead proved fruitless once again. The case of Elmer Crawford took an interesting turn when several people reported sightings of him in Western Australia. In response, 2 Victorian detectives recently travelled to the remote Pilbara region following another tip-off on Elmer's whereabouts, but unfortunately, they returned empty-handed. However, a former truck driver named Nugget Wright claims that he once stumbled across the killer. "We started asking questions. It turns out he said he was from Melbourne," said Nugget. "Anyway, I said, 'Where is your missus?' He told me she was long gone. Said, 'What year did you come up here?' And he said 1970. I asked, 'Why did you leave Melbourne?' And he said, 'I had to leave in a hurry. I did something terrible, and that's when the penny dropped.'" According to Nugget, the man's head dropped, his shoulders shrunk, and he had that attitude, "I've told this bloke too much." When Nugget mentioned the police's search for Elmer, the man's whole body language changed. However, the man claimed that he had never been interviewed by the police. Despite Nugget's account, the authorities have yet to confirm whether this sighting was legitimate or not. Despite numerous attempts by authorities to locate him, Elmer's whereabouts remain unknown. The authorities have gone so far as to offer a reward of $100,000 for any information leading to his arrest or conviction. The search for Elmer Crawford continues to this day, and the possibility of his capture remains a mystery. After the brutal murder of his wife and children, Elmer Crawford became a man on the run. Theories abound about where he went and what happened to him. One theory suggests that Crawford made his way to Western Australia, where he started a new life under a new name. Another theory is that he fled to New Zealand and lived there until his death. There have been reported sightings of Crawford over the years, including in Western Australia and in New Zealand. However, none of these sightings have been confirmed, and Crawford's whereabouts remain a mystery to this day. Some believe that Crawford may have taken his own life after committing the heinous crime. Others think he may have been killed by someone seeking revenge for the murder of his family. Despite the many theories about his whereabouts, Elmer Crawford has never been found. The case remains open, and authorities continue to search for any new leads that may finally bring closure to the tragic Crawford family murders. And that concludes our exploration of the Crawford family tragedy. Despite decades passing since the brutal events of that fateful night, the case remains unsolved, and Elmer Crawford's whereabouts remain a mystery. What was supposed to be a fun and relaxing night for Christina Whittaker strangely turned into something very sinister. Christina was a 21-year-old mother who had planned to meet her friends for drinks at a bar on November 13, 2009. It was a chilly night in Hannibal, Missouri, and Christina was having a good time at the Rookies Bar. But the next morning, Christina was nowhere to be found. There wasn't a definite explanation for Christina's disappearance yet, only some spine-chilling possibilities. What happened to Christina that night? Did Christina have any dark secrets which got her involved with the wrong people? Home to about 17,000 people, the beautiful city of Hannibal serves as a great spot for a weekend getaway, because of various activities it offers to tourists as well as locals. This river city is quite a unique place, as it offers events like ghost tours and some history-filled adventures. Also famous for being the birthplace and home of Mark Twain, Missouri's most charming town came into the public eye for all the wrong reasons in 2009. Hannibal isn't one of the safest places in America. Safer than only 4% of the U.S. cities, a person's chance to fall victim to a dangerous crime is 1 out of 275 in Hannibal, Missouri. And sadly, Hannibal became the setting for the disappearance of Christina Whittaker, a 21-year-old mother, in November 2009. Christina Whittaker was born on March 25, 1988, and brought up in her Hannibal, Missouri home. Christina stayed with her young parents, Cindy Elzia Young and Alex Young, and grew up with her protective brothers, Jeremy and Brian Whittaker. She was loved and pampered by all in her family, especially her mother.
We lived in Hannibal there. We've lived there all of our lives, both of us, and our kids were born and raised, all of us there.
Are you counting your eggs before they're hatched, Christina?
She grew up into an adorable, red-haired, 5'5" girl with light brown eyes. She went to Hannibal High School and then Hannibal Senior High. By 2009, she was 21 and had 2 tattoos on her body. On her right ankle, she had a Care Bear holding a green marijuana leaf, and on the other one, a large angel was on the back of her left shoulder. On April 27, 2009, Christina gave birth to a baby girl, whose father was Christina's then-boyfriend Dustin Johnston. She was only 21 at that time. They named their daughter Alexandria, but after a couple of months, Christina and Dustin decided to split up. Christina then met Travis Blackwell, and they started dating soon after. Christina and Alexandria moved in with Travis into his apartment. She would stay home and take care of Alexandria while Travis went to work. Christina loved her daughter and wanted the best for her. However, Christina herself had a troubled life. Cindy described Christina as mentally fragile, naive, and prone to childlike behavior. Christina was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, bipolar disorder, and anxiety attacks for which she would often take prescription medication. Christina always found comfort in talking to her mother, Cindy, no matter what time of the day it was. There wasn't a day that would go by without Christina talking to Cindy, whether it was over a call or texting. Cindy was Christina's biggest support system. On Thursday, November 12, 2009, Christina called her friends and asked them to meet her the next day for drinks. She was quite excited to see her friends as she hadn't been out in months, ever since she'd had her daughter. As planned, on Friday night, November 13, 2009, Christina and her friends were going to meet at Rookie's Sports Bar on 611 Broadway at 8:30 p.m. Travis decided to drive Christina and dropped her at the bar. They arrived a little late, around 8:45 p.m., but it didn't matter because at the end of the day, Christina only wanted to see her friends. She walked in and joined her friends at a table. Jokes and conversations followed, accompanied by drinks as they caught up with each other's lives. Christina was having a good time, and it was turning out to be a fun evening until Christina became overly intoxicated after having too much to drink. Christina became restless and started to spoil the night for everyone else. Curtis Rain, a bouncer at Rookies, escorted Christina out for causing too much disturbance. She later managed to get in again and asked her friends to drive her home. All her friends declined to do so as none of them wanted to leave the bar yet. Considering Christina's condition, it is surprising that none of her friends seemed even a little bit concerned about her. Christina then left Rookie's Sports Bar and went out on a chilly winter night. That was the last time her friends saw her. Christina never returned home. The next morning, when Travis didn't find Christina in his apartment, he called her mother, Cindy, to inform her. Cindy and her husband Alex were in Texas at that time. As soon as she heard the news from Travis, Cindy sensed that something wasn't right. Cindy and Alex immediately decided to drive back to Hannibal. On Sunday, November 15th, 2009, Cindy filed a missing persons report to the Hannibal Police Department. Christina's case was assigned to Lieutenant Jennifer Grote of Hannibal Police Department. She and her team were quite surprised that Cindy waited for more than 24 hours before she filed a report with the police. They acquired Christina's phone on Monday, November 16, 2009 from her boyfriend, Travis, and found out that the phone had gone through many hands after Christina went missing. Around 7 a.m. on Saturday, November 14, 2009, Christina's phone was found by a man named Danny Baker, just a few houses away from Sportsman's Bar. He went through her phone and recognized Christina's aunt. In a couple of hours, he dropped Christina's phone at her aunt's place. Christina's aunt then called Travis and asked him to collect the phone the same day. Travis took Christina's phone around 5:30 p.m. after work. The very next day, on November 15, 2009, Cindy took possession of the phone from Travis. She went through Christina's phone, scrolling through her call logs and text messages, but didn't find anything suspicious. The police then requested for the phone, and it was delivered to them by Travis on Monday. Clearly, a lot of people went through Christina's phone right after she went missing. This seemed a little odd to the police. When Christina's phone records came back, the police questioned Travis about a call between him and Christina made at 10:30 p.m. on the night she went missing. Travis told them that Christina had called him to let him know that she would be bringing him breakfast from the diner. She also said that she might call him again around 12:30 a.m. to pick her up, in case she didn't find a ride home. They searched the whole area around the Rookie Sports Bar. When Christina's friends and the staff at the bar were interrogated, a few blurry but important details were uncovered. Christina's friends stated that Christina was highly intoxicated and acting aggressive. She was seen taking her prescribed Vicodin and Xanax, which can complicate the management of bipolar disorder and cause impaired judgment when mixed with alcohol. Her friends too were quite drunk and didn't want to leave the bar to drop her home. Christina was then removed from the bar around 11:30 p.m. Christina managed to get back in after some time and asked her friends to drop her home, but still, none of them would budge. Christina then joined two unidentified men who were playing pool at the time. Around 11:45 p.m., Christina left the bar with these men.
I don't know, I remember if there was one or two guys, but one guy came in and grabbed her, and then they actually left.
According to Christina's friends, she was wearing a pink tank top, jeans, a white half-sleeve shirt with pink and white Nikes. The police started questioning the staff members of other nearby places to see if any of them had seen Christina that night. They learned that Christina was seen all by herself at River City Billiards on 603 Broadway, just next door. Christina was then spotted at another bar called Sportsman's Bar on 1112 South 7th Street. Vanessa Swank, a bartender at Sportsman's, was a close friend of the young family and knew Christina well. She told the police that Christina came into the bar when they were about to close. She was asking strangers to drop her home, but nobody agreed. A few minutes later, Vanessa saw Christina arguing with someone over the phone. Vanessa thought of going to her after closing up the bar, but by that time she saw Christina sobbing and running out to the back door. That was the last time Vanessa saw her. The police worked hard to find a potential suspect, but always found themselves at a dead end. The word about the case soon spread, and it gained a lot of media publicity. Not only the town of Hannibal, but the whole country was curious about Christina Whittaker's disappearance. On November 23, 2009, the Hannibal Police Department contacted the FBI and asked for their assistance. The combined team got to work immediately. They followed every tip that came in, brought in the canine squad, and even had boats patrolling the Mississippi River, which was only half a mile away from the bars Christina had visited on the night she went missing. 2 weeks after Christina's disappearance, an informant gave the police a tip about a potential suspect. The person was Darcy Morris. The informant told the police that Darcy was involved in a massive drugs and human trafficking business in Peoria and would often target people in Hannibal. The informant also said that he was the one who abducted Christina and took her to Peoria himself. The police wasted no time in questioning Morris. He denied that he had anything to do with Christina or her disappearance. He even had an alibi to prove that he wasn't at Rookie's Sports Bar the night Christina went missing. Morris told the police that he was celebrating his anniversary with his wife that night. When the police dug a little deeper, they found out that Morris actually had a very long rap sheet that included multiple domestic abuse and battery charges. He was also famous by his name Bookie. The police asked Christina's friends if they knew Morris or if they saw him at the bar with Christina that night. They all said they hadn't. The detectives didn't have any evidence to charge Morris with anything, and he was let go. Sometime later, Anthony McPike, Morris's cousin, came forward and claimed that he and Morris were with Christina that November night at Rookie's Sports Bar playing pool. He said that they were supposed to drop Christina home, but instead ended up taking her to Peoria. Christina's friends saw Anthony at the bar, but didn't remember whether the other guy with Anthony was Morris. Even after this, Morris denied having any ties with Christina. Years later, Anthony reached out to the police again and claimed that Morris had written him a letter in which he confessed to abducting Christina and killing her. The letter also said that Morris buried her in a hog farm in Ursa, and her body could be found there. When the police asked Anthony to present this letter, he said that in order to protect himself, he had to destroy the letter for his own legal safety. And yet again, the police were left going around in circles with many questions still unanswered. A few sources close to Christina's family claim that Morris and Christina did know each other. It was rumored that Christina had some sort of relationship with Morris and would often buy drugs for him. Some even claimed that they were dating each other. Cindy was shocked after hearing about Morris's connection with Christina. She hired a private investigator and made her way to Peoria. Cindy tried her best to find her daughter there. She and her PI would often question people and spread awareness about Christina being forced into human trafficking. She had high hopes that she would find her daughter here, but even after spending a significant amount of time in Peoria, Cindy couldn't find any trace of Christina and returned home to Cannibal. Steve Wilkos, an American TV personality, invited Christina's family and friends to his show 82 days after the night of Christina's disappearance. The episode, which was titled, "Did You Kill Christina?" was aired in February 2010. The episode brought many previously undisclosed details about Christina's case into the light. For a long time, Cindy had suspected Travis, Christina's boyfriend at the time she went missing, of being involved in her daughter's disappearance, and she did not shy away from speaking about it on Steve's show. She accused Travis of showing no emotion or concern following Christina's disappearance.
My answers, I want to know, did Travis have anything to do with it?
Cindy even stated that the 10:30 p.m. call between Christina and him most likely involved a heated argument. One of Christina's friends even confirmed that Christina and Travis did have a fight over a call that night. She said that both of them had a history of extreme domestic abuse between them. In the show's final segment, Wilkos made Travis take 2 lie detector tests regarding Christina's disappearance. According to Wilkos, he did not tell the truth and failed both the tests.
And the results for Travis's lie detector tests is that he did not tell the truth.
Since then, Travis, as well as Dustin, the father of her child, were put under a magnifying glass, and the police made sure they didn't miss out any clues. It seemed like it was turning into a clear-cut case from then onwards, which gave people hope to find answers. Only a few days after the show aired, everything went to waste when Cindy publicly took back all her accusations against Travis. She thought that Travis was a good person and wouldn't do anything to hurt her daughter. She even claimed that Travis took a lie detector test carried out by the Hannibal Police Department and passed it. Cindy's sudden change of opinions left people confused. Later, the police too cleared both Dustin Johnston and Travis Blackwell as potential suspects. Over the next few years, the case started to go cold. So in 2014, Christina's family announced a reward of $10,000 for anyone who could provide any information about Christina's whereabouts. Years went by, and nobody stepped forward with any information. Christina's family waited and waited, but they could never find any solid information, and this reward too went unclaimed. Breezy was a friend of Christina who was supposed to drop her home the night she went missing. Cindy was very disappointed in Breezy, as she thought that if she had been a little concerned about Christina that night, she would still be here, safe and sound. During the initial days after Christina's disappearance, Cindy and Breezy fell out of touch and lost contact with each other. It wasn't until early January 2020 when Breezy contacted Cindy out of the blue. Breezy had a confession to make. She told Cindy that on the night of Christina's disappearance, she did see Darcy Morris at Rookie's Sports Bar. A black-colored car pulled up at the back of Rookie's. Christina went there and got some drugs from Darcy, who was sitting in the passenger seat. Cindy remembered that Breezy had earlier denied to the police that she ever saw Darcy at Rookie's. This piece of information was massively important because this scenario linked the suspect to the victim. Breezy reportedly told the police everything, but she didn't tell them about Darcy. When questioned by Cindy, Breezy said she didn't tell anyone about it because she didn't want to get Christina to get into trouble. Cindy sent her personal investigator to Breezy so he could get a statement from her, but Breezy, once again, denied seeing or knowing Morris. Apart from the findings of the police's investigations, there were multiple theories that had been lingering around Hannibal. One of them even targets the authorities and suspects that they were involved in Christina's disappearance. The word about this theory spread like wildfire when Christina's family and the people of Hannibal noticed that the police were trying to keep things under wraps in Christina's case. New developments in her case were not being reported to Christina's family. Even the full report of Christina's phone records was not shared with her family. This kind of suspicious behavior by the Hannibal Police Department made a lot of people point fingers at them. Some people came forward and claimed that about 3 police officers from the Hannibal Department had been accused of having sexual relationships with Christina. It was also rumored that the officers that were known to trade favors with young girls as a way for them to avoid legal trouble and get a clean chit. A year and a half before Christina went missing, she had gotten a ticket for driving on a revoked license. In order to get that ticket thrown out, she agreed to work for an officer. It wasn't confirmed whether she was approached by a police officer or she volunteered herself to work as a confidential informant for the police department to clear off her ticket. The officers would make her buy and sell drugs, which would get her in contact with other dealers in and around the town. She would then provide these dealers' contacts and whereabouts to the police so they could bust them. In this case, Christina was in great danger, as it meant that if anyone from the drug trafficking industry recognized her, she would be in trouble. And a lot of people from Hannibal thought that this was what happened, and that the police were trying to cover up their own mess, which resulted in Christina's disappearance. Another set of people believed in a completely different scenario. These people were sure that Christina disappeared on her own will, and nobody else is to be blamed for it. They said that Christina was probably fed up with her life and had toxic relationships with her family members and friends. So she decided to run away and start afresh. Since Christina's phone was not immediately handed over to the police after being found, some people suspected that Christina's family too could be a reason behind her disappearance. The phone went through many hands before finally reaching the police, and any of those people who accessed Christina's phone would have had enough time to get rid of any evidence or clues on her phone. When Cindy heard of this news going around town, she felt hurt. She simply countered this assumption by letting everyone know that Christina was loved by all her family members and friends. And apart from that, she had a 6-month-old daughter waiting for her at home. Christina loved Alexandria and would never even think of abandoning her. Some people were sure that Christina's disappearance was an accident. They believed that the authorities overlooked some significant geographic details which suggest that Christina could have drowned. The road on which Rookie's Sports Bar and Sportsman's Bar are located stretches up to the Mississippi River and ends right next to it. The river is only half a mile away from the bars Christina visited that night. It would have taken only 9 minutes for Christina to walk to the river. Thinking of Christina's drunk and disoriented mental condition that night, people assumed that she walked to the river, and as it was dark, she slipped and fell into the stream. The powerful currents in the river would have made it nearly impossible for her to swim to safety, especially when she was intoxicated. It is believed that the river washed her hundreds of miles downstream, eventually drowning her. However, the police didn't completely overlook this assumption and had boats search for Christina throughout the river with no luck. Some people also noted the rural nature of Hannibal's setting. If Christina had decided to walk home that night and taken the route through the woods, hypothermia might have set in. It was a cold night on November 13, 2009, when Christina disappeared, and temperatures were said to have dropped to as low as 39.9 degrees Fahrenheit. Christina was not dressed well to have survived such low temperatures. There wasn't any solid proof to back up any of these theories. While some of these theories were quite plausible, there were dozens of others which were headed in completely different directions. Cindy was fighting every day to get her daughter back, and these theories were not any help to her. She believed that Morris trafficked Christina to Peoria, and she was now trapped there. Cindy was determined to get her back safe. In 2021, director Christina Fontana released a documentary called Relentless. She worked on Christina Whittaker's case for 11 years and gathered a significant amount of information, which included more than 400 hours of footage. In the last episode of the 6-part docuseries, an incarcerated source, who chose not to reveal their identity, gave a tip claiming that Christina Whittaker's body could be found buried in a well on a property.
Damn. Oh, I think I know exactly what you're talking about. It's like in the wooded area. There's a wooded area. Yes, okay. Oh my God, okay.
This is the closest I have felt.
The property in question was formerly owned by a man named Glenn Ledbetter. However, without any proof or evidence, the authorities couldn't get a search warrant for the property, and the new owner of the land denied access to them. There is no evidence that links Glenn Ledbetter or the new owner of the property to the crime yet. Darcy Morris was arrested for beating a man to death on July 11, 2013 in Peoria. On September 30, 2014, Morris pled guilty to his crimes and was charged with 1 count of murder. As part of a plea agreement, he received a 25-year sentence. Lieutenant Jennifer Grote had worked on Christina's case since day one. She interviewed more than 200 people in connection with the investigation in Christina's case. The people Grote interviewed also included people who were incarcerated for other crimes. Lieutenant Grote had worked with 45 agencies to gather even the tiniest bit of evidence that would lead her to Christina. In June 2021, Christina's family increased the reward offered by them to $25,000. Cindy believed that she would someday find her daughter and bring her home. She never lost hope. Sadly, Christina Whittaker has still not been found, and there have been no arrests in connection with her case. However, there have been multiple reports of her being spotted in Peoria. A waitress working in a cafe near East Peoria claimed that she saw Christina just days after her initial disappearance. But that's not all. A woman even claimed that she had spent time with Christina in a mental hospital. However, according to the Peoria Police Department, there have been no confirmed sightings of Christina in the area. A narcotics officer also claimed to have seen Christina when he was questioning the woman, but this woman ran away from the officer and he couldn't confirm her identity. There were many such cases where a bartender or waiter claimed to have seen Christina, but none of them led the police anywhere. One sighting which sparked a wave took place in Guadalajara. A red-haired woman who looked a lot like Christina was spotted in a terrible condition crying on the streets of Guadalajara. The woman's hands and feet were swollen and she looked mentally disoriented. Many people were sure that this was Christina Whittaker. The authorities got in touch with Cindy Young and her family immediately, and Cindy confirmed that this woman was not her daughter. After all this time, Cindy Young never lost hope. She fought for her daughter every day and hoped for her return. On March 25, 2023, Christina's family celebrated her 34th birthday together. They lit green and pink lanterns, Christina's favorite colors, to honor Christina and prayed for her safety. Cindy has kept publishing posts on her social media accounts as a way of communicating with Christina. She kept her updated about Alexandria, her life, and how she grew up to be a wonderful teenager. Cindy only hopes that Christina is somewhere out there reading these posts about how her family misses her and wishes for her return.
Hi, Christina. I don't know if you'll ever see this video, sweetheart. Usually I write to you on here, but I don't know if you ever see my letters or not. I hate it that Facebook is the only way I think I have a way of reaching you.
Even after more than 13 years from her disappearance, Christina Whittaker's case remains an unsolved mystery. The world still wonders whether her disappearance was an abduction, a suicide, or a murder. After vanishing with only a few traces, Christina Whittaker left behind Alexandria, her mother Cindy Young, and hundreds of unanswered questions. Christina was a loving mother who was just excited to go out with her friends after a long time. But what happened to her that night left her loved ones horrified. Alexandria has had to grow up without the love and care of her mother. Cindy misses her, but still stands strong and believes that Christina is somewhere out there. Even though every day is a challenge for her, she still continues to fight for her daughter, with the hopes of her coming back home someday. Natasha Atchley, a 19-year-old college student, was visiting her hometown of Livingston, Texas. On Saturday night of May 2nd, 1992, Natasha was having a great time at a party with her friends in Shepherd. Little did she know that this fun night would soon turn into her worst nightmare. Natasha left the party and never returned home. In the early hours of the next morning, her charred remains were found in the trunk of her car. What happened to Natasha after she left the party? Was her death a result of an accident, or did she fall prey to a heinous predator? Shepherd, San Jacinto County, Texas. Shepherd is a city in San Jacinto County in the state of Texas. The town was named for Houston banker and landowner B.A. Shepherd, who came to San Jacinto County in 1875. With a population of 2,319, Shepherd is the 642nd most populated city in the state of Texas out of 1,752 cities. It was once a center for the lumber industry and even now remains an important market town in southeast Texas. Shepherd has a surprisingly interesting selection of local county parks and recreational offerings for those who love the outdoors, and that's why Double Lake Recreation Area, Humble Library, Wolf Creek Park, and Standstill Park are huge attractions of the town. Although when it comes to well-being, Shepherd is not amongst one of the safest places in Texas. With a moderately high crime rate, the chances of a person falling victim to a violent crime here are 1 in 341. Sadly, this is where the cheerful Natasha Atchley took her last breath, and Shepherd became a land of horror for her. This case took place in the early 1990s, and it's a story that will blow your mind. It all began when Natasha Atchley went for a night out with her friends and never returned home. Natasha Ann Atchley was born on May 11, 1972, in Angelina County, Texas, in the United States. She grew up in Livingston, Texas, with her mother, Karen Woodward, and 2 younger brothers. Natasha's father, Lloyd Nolan Atchley, separated from Natasha's mother, Karen, when Natasha was about 2 years old. He then married another woman named Patricia Walters. Sadly, Lloyd was killed by Patricia's brother Keith in self-defense. On July 24, 1980, Patricia and her brother got into an argument with Lloyd. It was night time when Patricia and her brother Keith left Lloyd at the Hardin Country Club. Lloyd followed them and stabbed Keith in his leg and Patricia in the right side of her chest. Lloyd was about to stab Patricia again, but Keith intervened and shot Lloyd dead. Patricia survived her injuries. During her senior year of high school, Natasha moved to Odessa, West Texas, to live with her grandparents, Nolan and Nell Atchley. She graduated from Odessa Permian High School in 1990 and then enrolled in Blinn College. Natasha then moved into an apartment in College Station and lived there with her roommates as she attended her classes at the Blinn College. Natasha's lifelong friend, Keisha Myers, remembers that Natasha was a pretty and popular girl back in school.
There was something about Natasha.
Popular, pretty.
She was also a great cheerleader and attracted a lot of attention. Keisha described her best friend as a spunky, wild, and fun girl with a free spirit.
She was a cheerleader. She just was wild, and she loved to have a good time.
Keisha and Natasha grew up in Livingston and were inseparable. Even when Natasha moved to Odessa during her senior year, their friendship remained strong because Natasha was a very loyal friend. Chad Woodward, the older of Natasha's 2 younger brothers, was 7 years younger than Natasha and really looked up to her. He defined her as an attractive and lively girl who was always surrounded by her friends. She loved spending her time playing the piano or cheerleading. Natasha's life full speed ahead was the only way Natasha knew how to live. In May 1992, Natasha decided to visit her family and friends in her hometown, Livingston. To celebrate her birthday, one of Natasha's friends had planned to throw a party that coming weekend and had invited Natasha as well. Natasha was excited to meet her friends after a significantly long time and looked forward to attending the party. On May 2, 1992, a Saturday night, Natasha took her 1989 Chevrolet Camaro and drove to her friend's party in 5 Acres and Independence subdivision in San Jacinto County. She reached there with a male friend around 9 p.m. and joined her friends at the party. Natasha had a pretty good time catching up with her friends over drinks. Later, around 3 a.m. Sunday, Natasha decided to take off from the gathering and head to her mother's house. She got into her car and left alone, only to never return home. On May 3, 1992, In the morning hours of Sunday, a man who was returning home with his grandson after spending time fishing at a nearby lake spotted a burnt-up car on a dirt trail in a woodland area. The car was covered in debris, and most parts of it were still on fire. Around 10 a.m., the man called the San Jacinto County Sheriff's Office and reported the incident. Within an hour, the deputy arrived at the scene. San Jacinto County Deputy Kevin Freed didn't think of the scene as something unusual or concerning. He assumed the car was either stolen or had been dumped there as part of an insurance scam. He immediately had the smouldering car towed to a Shepherd wrecking yard where it was held pending further investigation. The first signs of concern arose when Natasha Atchley was reported missing to the Polk County authorities on Sunday night, May 3, 1992. The report was filed by Karen Woodard, Natasha's mother, who stated that her daughter was supposed to see her Sunday morning. Karen told the authorities that, as it was Mother's Day, Natasha had promised to stop by Karen's place. The Polk County authorities informed Karen about finding Natasha's incinerated car and then sent an investigator to take a look at the car and the area where it was found. The investigator went and even clicked a few pictures of the site and the car, but found nothing unusual. He said that the car was still smoldering. On May 4, 1992, Monday morning, Karen headed to the Shepherd wrecking yard where Natasha's car was being held and decided to take a look around the area herself. There had been heavy rainfall the previous night, and a lot of debris on the car had washed away. As soon as Karen saw the burnt-out shell of Natasha's 1989 Chevrolet Camaro, she realized that something horrible had happened and burst into tears. She still kept looking and started crying hysterically when she found pieces of Natasha's broken jewelry. Her cries only intensified when she looked in the hatch of the Camaro and saw what she immediately recognized as a human skull. The rest of the body's remains were found there too. Although the identity of the body wasn't confirmed yet, the police began the investigation on May 4, 1992, based on the assumption that the body was Natasha Atchley's. The case was assigned to Chief Deputy Tom Branch, who was going to lead the investigation. His team included Assistant Chief Deputy Raymond Edmonds, Sergeant Doug Conn, and Detective Joe Rhodes. Looking at the condition of the body, Branch was concerned about the extent the body had burnt to. A portion of the skull, along with some bone fragments, was sent to Harris County Medical Examiner's Office for identification. Dr. Cecil Wingo, an experienced forensic examiner from Murray County, took a personal interest in the case. He hadn't seen anything like this in his entire career and wanted to help as much as he could. Despite the intensity of the fire, Wingo even decided to visit San Jacinto County to look at additional evidence and assured everyone that despite the intensity of the fire, there was enough evidence to eventually get a positive identification for the body. Even though the body's identity had not been confirmed yet, Karen, Natasha's mother, knew it was Natasha's body. Karen had a memorial service for Natasha at Cochrane Funeral Home in Livingston on Saturday, May 9, 1992. On Tuesday, May 12, 1992, a report of the body's identification came through, and it was confirmed that the body was Natasha Atchley's. Medical examiners also determined that it would have taken a 1,500-degree fire burning constantly for at least 3 hours to have burnt the body down to the bones. The exact cause of Natasha's death could not be determined because of the current state of her remains. The medical examiners tried to reconstruct the skull to find out whether there was any physical trauma, such as a gunshot or a dent to the head, but nothing could be surely determined. A private graveyard service was organized for Natasha on Wednesday, May 13, 1992, attended by her mother, stepfather, an aunt, and the staff from Cochrane Funeral Home and Pace Funeral Home. Natasha Atchley was buried at Restland Memorial Park Cemetery, Livingston, Polk County, Texas, alongside her father, Lloyd Nolan Atchley. The autopsy report for Natasha was still pending, And so Branch and his team started the investigation by acquiring more information about Natasha's plans and whereabouts around the night she went to the birthday party. Although Natasha used to live in College Station, almost 2 hours away from her hometown in Livingston, she still kept in touch with most of her friends back home. She would often visit them during the holidays and when she had time off from college. About 2 weeks before Natasha was murdered, she had called her best friend, Keisha Myers, telling her that she would be visiting Livingston during the Mother's Day weekend. Natasha wanted to make sure that Keisha was there in Livingston when she would visit, but unfortunately, Keisha was not home at the time, and her grandmother answered the call, who later informed Keisha about Natasha's visiting plans. Keisha told the investigators that Natasha had said she had something important to tell her, and would do so when she arrived. Keisha never found out what Natasha wanted to tell her. Branch and his team then moved towards investigating the birthday party Natasha was attending. A crowd of about 20 people attended the party that Saturday night. The people who attended belonged to well-to-do families in Polk County.
There were some folks at the party that were family members of some elected officials and others in Polk County.
According to her friends, Natasha left the party in her car and went alone. It was around 3 a.m. on Sunday, May 3, 1992, when people last saw her before she took off. Branch figured out that it was a heavy-duty drug party. The people who attended went wild under the effects of hard drugs and alcohol. This definitely made things harder for investigators, but Branch was determined. During the initial days of the investigation, the detectives received a tip from a man named Anthony Cornelius. He told the police that Natasha had been in a physical altercation with a girl named Cindy Hennings at the party. As they were fighting, Jim Morton, Cindy's boyfriend, intervened and was seen kicking Natasha in the head. Natasha left shortly after this. According to the tip, Cindy, Jim, and another friend named Kevin Malone left the party soon after Natasha did, suggesting that they might have raced after Natasha and killed her.
Can't say for 100%, but the statement that I gave was, yeah, I did see her, but with the amount of people standing around, it was quite a, it was a circle of people.
Anthony wasn't even at the party. He was only passing through the area when one of his friends called him to watch a fight that was already going on, which included Natasha. Anthony said he couldn't fully be sure of whom he saw with Natasha that night. Both Jim and Cindy were arrested, but then Anthony soon recanted his statements and the pair were released.
I think it was down the road is where the gathering was. There was a bunch of people gathered up, like on that side of the edge of the woods.
Jim and Cindy still were considered potential suspects in the case, but there was no evidence to suggest that they had anything to do with Natasha's death. Since everyone was super high that night, Branch interviewed dozens of people who attended the party, some of them for 7 to 8 hours, but still found it extremely difficult to get any information out of anyone. They hardly had any recollection of that night, but Branch was quite suspicious that someone at the party was definitely hiding something from him. They tried questioning Natasha's old boyfriends as well, but nothing of any value came from it. Branch issued search warrants and, with his team, conducted searches of houses and vehicles of people in the surrounding area and anyone who was linked to the party. Even the searches didn't lead the investigators anywhere. Branch sent a few deputies to search for any clues in the area where Natasha's car had been found, which was only a mile away from where the party took place. The fact that the car had already been towed to a wrecker yard meant that the crime scene had been compromised before the investigation even started. The area where the car was found abandoned showed no clues as to what had happened to Natasha. The deputies noticed that although the car had been stuck in a groove, there were no signs of any footprints on the ground, and nothing indicated that a struggle had taken place. Investigators believe that Natasha was killed at or near the site of the party, sometime during the night or in the early morning hours of Sunday, May 3, 1992, and then driven to the dirt road where the car was set on fire. Even a week after Natasha's car was discovered, detectives were still finding bone fragments and teeth in her car trunk. Representatives of the state fire marshal's office took evidence from the car as well as from the area where the car was burned to a lab in Arlington for additional testing. A forensic examination of the car was conducted, and it was found that the fire had started on the front passenger seat. Investigators concluded that whoever burned the car had used an accelerant which contained a petroleum fuel mixture. Further lab reports indicated that the accelerant used was identified as drip gas, and as the area where the car was found had multiple old oil wells, drip gas was easily available. Branch commented that not everyone knew how to get drip gas out of the oil wells, and this narrowed down the suspect somewhat. The examiners also found that the fire was so hot that Natasha's body was essentially cremated. All that was left of her were a few scattered pieces of bones and her skull. The skull had fractured and then exploded in the intense fire, because of which it was impossible for the medical examiners to determine the actual cause of Natasha's death. Days passed, and there were no new developments in the case, just rumors flying around. Even though a lot of people had come out to show their support for Natasha, there still was talking and whispering. Karen Woodard, Natasha's mother, decided to address the situation herself. She told the public that all the rumors she had heard were false, and she only wanted the truth to come out. For now, she believed that her daughter's death was the result of an accident. Karen wanted everyone to learn from Natasha's case. Kids and drugs don't mix well, and everyone should be very careful about their children's company. Pressure was building up on Branch. He made San Jacinto County Sheriffs, Polk County Sheriffs, and the State Fire Marshal's office work together to get to the bottom of this case. Everyone was devoting long shifts, sometimes as long as 18 hours, to the investigation. Polk County Crime Stoppers, Inc. offered a reward of $1,000 in May 1992 to anyone who could provide them with information that could lead them to a potential suspect. Later, in December 1992, Branch got the FBI involved in the case. For a week, Branch, along with his team, had gone with the FBI agents for a retreat away from all the distractions. They studied the whole case again, looked at every single detail, and tried to put the pieces together. Branch even conducted polygraph tests on a few people which neither eliminated nor implicated anyone. Branch believed that even though the investigation was making slow progress, he was now closer to catching the culprit. As months passed by, Branch's confidence in the case kept sinking. With no new findings or any clues, Natasha's case slowly went cold, leaving her family and the detectives with hundreds of questions. From the start of the investigation, detectives were plagued by rumors about Natasha's death. Some people said she had been in a physical altercation with several people at the party, and they followed her and killed her. Some people even claimed that she had been killed by the son of a county judge, who then covered up the crime. A few people said Natasha owed money to drug dealers, and they were responsible for her death. Investigators worked overtime, trying to determine if there was any truth to any of the rumors. Most of these rumors turned out to be false, and the others were dismissed due to lack of evidence. One of the theories that lingered in the town for a while stated that Natasha got into a fight with someone at the party. The killer then threw her in the car and set it on fire. They were convinced that someone had already hidden in her car, and when Natasha was away from the crowds, he ambushed her. The fact that no footprints or tire tracks were found at the crime scene dispute this theory. Another theory that emerged suggested that Natasha's car had gotten stuck in the mud. There was also an assumption that since it rained heavily that night, her car might have gotten stuck on the isolated dirt road. In an attempt to free the car, Natasha might have revved up the engine, which could have caused the back tires to spin and sink deeper into the mud. Because of Natasha's intoxicated state of mind, maybe she couldn't figure a way out of the car when it caught fire. The car then sank to the point where neither of the doors could be opened and the windows were jammed. And so, Natasha got trapped, trying to find an alternative exit. She perhaps attempted to get out through the back hatch, but found out that the hatch couldn't be opened from inside the car. The dense smoke would have easily knocked her unconscious within a few minutes. It was assumed that the fire had started due to her repeated attempts to get out of the car. Excessively spurring up the engine may have caused the car to catch on fire. Natasha would have tried to exit the car once she saw the flames, although if this was true, the question how the accelerant got into the car still remained a mystery. Plenty of Natasha's friends and other witnesses admitted to the police that drugs and alcohol were readily available at the party. Natasha had been drinking and was high on at least 3 doses of LSD. There was a high chance that she became disoriented when she left the party and ended up on the isolated dirt road by accident. Since the deputies didn't find any footprints or tire tracks to and from Natasha's car location, it was unlikely that someone had followed her. This definitely wasn't a perfect theory. According to the initial forensic testing done on Natasha's car, drip gas had been used as an accelerant. The fact that Natasha was carrying drip gas in her car seemed unlikely to the investigators. Detectives who handled the case later on wondered if the initial testing might have been incorrect, as the technology and procedures weren't as advanced in 1992 as they were now. Unfortunately, there was no evidence left from the car that could be retested, which left no way of confirming those test results. Over 3 decades after Natasha's death, her case still remains a mystery. Every few years, a new detective would reopen the case and hope that something that was missed in the earlier investigation might turn up this time. Sadly, no new clues were found that could help solve Natasha's case. The detectives told Chad Atchley, Natasha's half-brother, that they haven't given up yet and are working constantly to get to the truth.
She said time and time again, this will be solved in your lifetime, and I strongly believe that.
The detectives also reached out to numerous people who attended the party 30 years ago to corroborate or refute any rumors about Natasha having an altercation. The interviews yielded no concrete evidence of foul play between the possible suspects and Natasha. Henning declined to speak with investigators, but her friend, Dana Birmingham, told investigators that she recalled that Natasha had taken off from the party and hadn't had run-ins with anyone that night. Birmingham also claimed that Morton and Henning left an hour after Natasha did. Natasha also reportedly had a run-in with Chad McGregor, another party guest. Interviews with Jim Morton, Kevin Malone, and Chad McGregor further supported the possibility that the death was not homicide. Their stories matched what they said in the initial investigation 30 years ago. Some are convinced that Natasha's death wasn't a murder at all, while some think otherwise. Retired Sheriff's Office Chief Deputy Tom Branch believed that he definitely interviewed the person that killed Natasha. With the amount of evidence he had, he could never figure out who it was. He felt as if he had missed something along the way. Natasha's loved ones have been fighting to get her justice and are not ready to back down. But there is a high chance that nobody may ever know for certain exactly what happened on the night that Natasha Atchley died. As of March 2023, the Texas Department of Public Safety and the Texas Rangers Unsolved Crimes Investigation Team still have the case classified as an unsolved homicide. Crime Stoppers is offering a $3,000 reward, in addition to a $15,000 reward being offered by Natasha's family for information leading to the arrest of the person or persons responsible for the crime. Natasha's untimely death left her loved ones confused and looking for answers. The passage of time didn't make dealing with her death any easier.
Once you've seen your sister's burned remains, no, you never forget that.
Her family and friends have fought for justice for 30 years and are still staying strong. Karen Woodard, Natasha's mother, lost her battle to cancer when it took her life in 2002. Karen did everything she could to keep the case in the public eye. She wrote frequent letters to local newspapers to remind people that Natasha's murder remained unsolved. Chad shared how his sister's death affected her. His mother changed after finding Natasha's remains. It completely broke her.
I just can't believe that that's what happened. There's too many other unexplained things.
He also doesn't believe that his sister's death was an accident. It was his mother's dying wish to find out what happened with Natasha. But sadly, Karen went away too soon. Keisha Myers, Natasha's best friend, recalled how Natasha once jokingly told her that she'd die young, and it was so unfortunate how that came true. Keisha was there with Karen when Karen passed away. Keisha spoke of how Karen cared for her like her own daughter, and Keisha's boys like her own grandchildren. Keisha's boys, including the one she was pregnant with when Natasha died, are grown now. He reminds her of Natasha, her intelligence, her sense of adventure, her self-determination. Keisha feels as if he was a gift from Natasha to her. Keisha still hopes that one day the truth about Natasha's death would come out. Natasha's family and friends have only longed for answers all these years. They want to know the truth behind Natasha's death. They want to know what happened to Natasha on that unfortunate night. Ever since Kelly Siegler, a former prosecutor, released episodes from the documentary series Cold Case, where she reopened Natasha's case to investigate it again, a majority of people have come to believe that Natasha's death was indeed a bizarre accident, although some still think otherwise. Natasha today rests in peace alongside her father, Lloyd Nolan Atchley, and her grandparents, Nolan Grant Atchley and Nell Atchley. Do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, stay safe, and thanks for watching.